Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Ousted Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro appeared in a New York court this morning, pleading not guilty to drug and weapons charges. Maduro was captured by the U.S. on the weekend in Venezuela, and President Donald Trump's administration has used those charges to justify the extraordinary step. It leaves many questions, including what happens now in Venezuela and what it means for other countries, including Canada. We're taking your calls. What are the implications for Canada, and how should Canada respond? I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. You can call us now. What is your reaction to the U.S. ouster of Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro? What are the implications for Canada, and how should Canada respond? Our number is 604-669-3733. That's 604-669-3733. Or dial 1-800-825-5950. You can also hit pound 690 or email bctoday@cbc.ca. On Saturday, Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores were captured by the U.S. in a special military operation. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Dan Kane, chair of the U.S. Joint Chief of Staff, described the raid as an action carried out on behalf of the U.S. Justice Department. Venezuela's former Vice President Delcy Rodriguez has assumed the role of interim president. This morning, the UN Security Council discussed the operation, with Secretary General Antonio Guterres stating that he is, quote, deeply concerned that rules of international law have not been respected. And in another development this morning, Maduro appeared in the New York court along with his wife. Both Maduro and Flores pleaded not guilty. And while leaving court, he said he was, quote, a prisoner of war. Maduro is accused of narco-terrorism, drug trafficking, and weapons charges, while his lawyers are expected to contest the legality of his arrest. Their next court date is in mid-March. Here in BC, emotions are running high among people with ties to Venezuela. Ivan Contramaestre left Venezuela 3 decades ago and is now director of the Venezuelan Canadian Society of BC, and he joins me now. Ivan, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Can you tell me what your reaction was when you learned on Saturday that the U.S. had captured Nicolás Maduro?
Oh boy, well, my initial reaction was just a little bit of trepidation. At the time, as the events were occurring, we didn't have a lot of information. We were just getting messages from family that they were hearing some detonations, and they were receiving some videos. So we didn't know exactly what was happening. We had a lot of questions. We, of course, initially feared for the well-being of our family. And we just didn't know exactly what was happening. Well, we all assumed it was probably a change, or we were hoping it was going to be a change or the beginning of a change for a regime.
And we've heard that from many people with ties to Venezuela. Can you tell us more about what life had been like for Venezuelans under Maduro's regime?
Well, I don't think it's any secret that Venezuela has been suffering from a deep humanitarian crisis for the past decade and a half, or thereabouts. Inflation has been impossible. There is obviously a lot of neglect of the population and crimes against it. We have political prisoners. There's a lot of hurt for the people in Venezuela under the regime.
And many have moved to Canada and
as a result,
numbers.
Yes.
Yeah.
As a result, many people fled, of course. Yeah, 8 million people and counting so far.
What has been the reaction from people in your organization?
Well, my organization is the Venezuelan Canadian Society of BC. It was founded mostly as a cultural organization, nonprofit, volunteer-run, and so we did feel a responsibility to do more for our fellow countrymen back home. So we started doing some fundraisings and trying to do send some help and trying to keep the ties and trying to integrate people that arrive, but also keeping the ties with country back home. A lot of aid and a lot of financial aid help.
And you said you have been in contact with friends and family.
Yes.
How are they feeling now in the last day and a half?
So there's a lot of questions. They are, of course, wondering what's going to happen in the near future. Obviously, the removal of Maduro is only the removal of one person, but there's a whole regime behind it. So what does that mean to them? There's a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty, I guess. And there is hope. There is hope that this is maybe a step in the right direction to restoring a true democracy in Venezuela.
And how hopeful are you about that, given what we've heard from President Donald Trump? Right now, it is the former vice president of Maduro, Delcy Rodriguez, who is acting as interim president. How hopeful are you about the days to come?
Well, we are hopeful. This is just a sliver of hope being returned back to us. Venezuelans have been betrayed by their leadership many, many times over the last 2.5 decades. So we're hopefully optimistic. We do hope that this is one step forward in the right direction, but there's also that skepticism because we've been betrayed so many times. So one step at a time, I guess, can get too ahead of ourselves.
What are your thoughts about the possibility or the likelihood of opposition leaders being able to take office?
Well, that's the hope. That was the will of the majority of the Venezuelans in the last election, right? 70% plus in the polls that they won the election by, and that's what the Venezuelans want. It's obviously not going to be an easy transition, especially because now there's international players involved. But that's what we want. We want to restore that true democracy that we had at some point. We want to return to that. So if there's anybody that I believe that deserves to be there, is the ones that the people voted for and elected in the last election.
And Canada has recognized the opposition leader, Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia, as the concluded legitimate winner of those elections and president-elect. Prime Minister Mark Carney put a statement on X saying that Canada has not recognized the illegitimate regime of Maduro since it stole the 2018 election. He also said that in keeping Canada has long supported a peaceful, negotiated, and Venezuelan-led transition process that respects the democratic will of the Venezuelan people. What are you hoping for from the Prime Minister and from the Canadian government?
Well, I mean, I expect this. I expect support for the lawful electoral process. I expect them to apply some pressure to all parties so that it happens sooner rather than later. And I expect full support afterwards for helping us rebuild the country. The country is in shambles right now, and we are going to need the help of countries like Canada into establishing some sort of stability or helping us with some stable while we rebuild, right? So,
Ivan, it is very good to speak with you. I really appreciate your joining us today. Thank you.
Of course, thank you for having us.
Ivan Contramaestre is director of the Venezuelan Canadian Society of BC. It's 12:15 now. U.S. President Donald Trump's remarks over the weekend following Maduro's capture is extending concerns to other countries. Trump said U.S. military action could soon be coming to Colombia and Mexico, adding Cuba may simply fall on its own. Here he was speaking to Air Force One, reporters on Air Force One, rather.
Colombia is very sick, too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States, and he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you.
So there will be an operation by the U.S. and
It sounds good to me, yeah. You know why? Because they kill a lot of people, yeah. And by the way, you have to do something with Mexico. Mexico has to get their act together because they're pouring through Mexico, and we're going to have to do something. We'd love Mexico to do it. They're capable of doing it. But unfortunately, the cartels are very strong in Mexico. Cuba always survived because of Venezuela. Now they won't have that money coming in. They won't have the income coming in. You know, a lot of Cubans were killed yesterday. You know that. We're dealing with the people that just got sworn in. And don't ask me who's in charge because I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
It means we're in charge.
Now, in a separate interview published in The Atlantic magazine, Trump also reiterated his desire to take over Greenland, saying it will be, quote, from the standpoint of national security. (12:17) now. You're with BC Today, and we are asking you, what is your reaction to the U.S. ouster of Nicolás Maduro in Venezuela? What are the implications for Canada, and how should Canada respond? And if you have ties to Venezuela, we would love to hear from you. You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, 604-669-3733. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining me now for this part of the conversation is Max Cameron, political scientist at UBC's School of Public Policy and Global Affairs. Max, welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much.
I should also say, if you have ties to the region, certainly there are going to be, or expected to be, or questions around ripple effects of what happened in Venezuela. So if you have ties to the region, we'd love to hear from those callers as well. Max, what went through your mind on Saturday when news broke of the U.S. raid and actions in Venezuela?
Really a lot of confusion, because the account that we've been given in many ways just doesn't add up. On the one hand, we're told that this is a law enforcement operation, that Maduro was indicted and has been brought to justice. But then Trump says we're running Venezuela and we're going to take charge of their oil industry. And those two things just don't sort of add up. But they do seem of a piece with his national security strategy, which was just released last month, which takes us back to a world of the 19th century of spheres of influence, where the United States dominates the Western Hemisphere and positions itself as a kind of a police force that can require countries to do its bidding. So it's a very interesting situation. And I guess the big uncertainty is the president of Venezuela has been removed, but now the vice president is in place. So the regime hasn't changed. And it really feels in many ways more like a presidential coup than an invasion.
What would that mean then? What are the implications of that?
Well, excuse me, I think the implication is that the United States is threatening invasion. It's holding invasion like a sword of Damocles over Caracas. If you don't do what we tell you, we will come in with greater force. And I'm not sure that that's an entirely credible threat, because the reality is that the government of Venezuela has been deeply penetrated by the forces of the Bolivarian Revolution. Every branch of government, every agency, every ministry, down to the street level bureaucrats, is controlled by the Bolivarian Revolution. And Delcy Rodriguez is a hardliner. Trump said in his press release that he'd had conversations with her and she was going to be compliant. At the same time that he threw under the bus Maria Corina Machado, the Nobel Peace Prize winner and the person who won more votes in the primary elections prior to the last presidential elections, and then threw her support behind Edmundo Gonzalez, who clearly won that election. She's the most obvious person if you're going to have a transition to democracy. But Trump is not talking about a transition to democracy. That's really the puzzling thing. And I think it's because they don't really want to be running the government, but they want the government to do what they tell them. And now the question is, you look at this from the point of view of Caracas, if you're Delcy Rodriguez, what's your game? What are you trying to do? I think you're trying to hang on to power. You're trying to use this moment to at least allow for time for people to exit and possibly to try to remain in power. And so I think there's a kind of a game of chicken that's at the heart of this sort of implicit pact that I think has been formed between the U.S. government and the Venezuelan government. That's why the previous speaker spoke of hope, but also trepidation and uncertainty. The government, the president has been removed, but the government remains the same. The regime remains the same.
Well, that's just it. I was going to ask you, you mentioned the opposition leaders, right? Ms. Machado and Mr. Gonzalez. Both have come out with praise regarding this ouster. And so given the that sentiment that Venezuelan people are happy, have that hope following the removal of Maduro, how do we square those two things and what the U.S. has done here, as you say, along with how Venezuelans are feeling about it?
This is a horrific regime that has operated in bad faith with the international community. So I think it's understandable that the opposition, on the one hand, desperately wants Maduro to be removed. He has done nothing since taking office in 2013 but undermine Venezuelan democracy, refused to acknowledge election victories repeatedly, National Assembly victories, going back to 2015, presidential elections, 2018, bizarre Constituent Assembly created to get around the fact that the opposition won. 2024, the opposition won massively, and he simply ignored the result. So they are right to want him out, and they are, of course, pointing to the horrific situation in Venezuela. But at the same time, this regime, really going back to Chavez, has played the international community. We go back to OAS Secretary General Gaviria's attempts to mediate after the crisis in 2002, right through to the most recent efforts by the Norwegian government to put in place some kind of mechanism to negotiate a peaceful resolution. And the Venezuelan government has played these forces and refused to change. So it's understandable to me that the opposition might see here an opportunity. And yet the incredible thing is that the Trump administration is not playing around with that. They're not seemingly prepared to work with the opposition. Instead, what they're doing is they're saying, well, we are going to impose our will. We're going to run Venezuela via Delcy Rodriguez and the Bolivarian regime. That just doesn't add up. It makes no sense. It's not sustainable. And so something is going to have to give. There's going to have to be a shift one way or the other. It's not clear what exactly that's going to look like. And I would hope, and I think, again, to speak to what Yvonne was saying earlier, I think our role should be in Canada to push for a democratic result as soon as possible. For democratic elections, let the opposition, which clearly has demonstrated its popularity, let the opposition return to power. And how does that happen? Well, one of the things that we need to see is divisions within the regime. And that's if we begin to see the regime lose cohesion or to become divided between hardliners like Delcy Rodriguez and more moderate forces that want change, there's the possibility of a negotiated democratic solution.
My guest, Max Cameron, professor of global affairs and public policy at UBC. And we're taking your calls as well. What is your reaction to the ouster of Venezuelan leader, now former Venezuelan leader, Nicolás Maduro? What are the implications for other countries like Canada? And how do you think Canada should respond? We heard some comments there regarding that. Our number is 604-669-3733, 604-669-3733, or 1-800-825-5950. You can also email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. And let's go now to our callers. Peter has been waiting in White Rock. Peter, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, many, but first of all, that the attack on Venezuela was completely illegal under international law. It wasn't approved by the U.S. Congress, which also makes it illegal. And the hypocrisy of the Trump regime is incredible. Just a few weeks ago, Trump pardoned the former president Hernandez of Honduras, who was described as by the New York Times as, quote, one of the largest and most violent drug traffic conspirators in the world, and they apparently brought in 400 tons of cocaine to the U.S. Trump pardoned him, so it's got nothing to do with those issues. Secondly, the United States has been putting economic pressures on Venezuela for decades, which has helped to ruin the economy. And in fact, in 2002, the Bush regime tried to overthrow the government in Venezuela. And there's, in fact, a great documentary made by an Irish film crew who was in there at the time called The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, which shows you how it failed. Thirdly, what Trump has actually honestly said was that he's reinventing the so-called Monroe Doctrine, which means the U.S. has the right to interfere with countries all throughout the Americas. And usually that's violent, whether it's like the fascist coup in Chile in '73, which the CIA under Nixon brought into power, the slaughters in El Salvador, the fascist regime in Brazil. And one interesting thing, in the U.S. war against Nicaragua in the 1980s, they killed, 40 or 50,000 Nicaraguans. And one of the guys who was implicated in the Iran-Contra scandal is also now speaking up for Trump. Finally, thanks for your patience, this does not bode well for Canada, Greenland, or almost any other country. It's pure hypocrisy. It's pure political power, and it's narcissism on the part of the U.S. dictator.
Peter, thank you very much for your call, and we'll touch on some of your points there as well, including the factor of the oil industry and the oil reserves in Venezuela, and as well as what Canada should do in response. But right now, let's go to Mohammed in Victoria. Mohammed, what's your reaction to the news out of Venezuela? Hi, Mohammed, are you there? I think we've lost our connection with Mohammed. Here now, let's go to Leith joining us from Langley. Our numbers, again, I'll just give them out one more time. Let me try once more if we have Mohammed.
Hello.
Hi there, Mohammed. Yes, go ahead. We'll go to Leith after you then. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Okay. Hi, thanks for taking my call. I agree with the previous caller and what's been said so far. I think it's deplorable what the U.S. has done. I'm not a fan of the Maduro regime. It is illegitimate. It took control of power illegally. But still, it's not for the U.S. to decide that they don't like something. This is where the rest of the world, and especially the West, has to stand up and stop mollycoddling to the idiot, because he is a dictator no better than Putin or Kim Jong-un. He has, again, the legitimacy of what is being done is so corrupt. It's had nothing to do with drugs. It has everything to do with oil that the U.S. wants. Supposedly, U.S. has tons of oil and they don't need Canada. But why are they taking over the whole oil industry in Venezuela? I mean, this is just a farce. And the West has to stand up and put its foot down. As the previous caller said as well, this is a dangerous precedent where they are going to start going after countries that they want under the guise of either drugs, oil, or national security.
Mohammed,
the Supreme Court has struck down so many things that Trump has done, yet they keep doing it. And I don't understand how he can get away with all this nonsense.
Mohammed, thank you very much for the call. That's Mohammed calling us from Victoria. And this morning, the United Nations Security Assembly did discuss the military action by the U.S. in in Venezuela. So we're going to talk more about that coming up as well as we discuss this further with our guest, Max Cameron. And we'll continue to take your calls. Leith waiting in Langley as well. You're with BC Today. and we are spending the hour taking your reaction to the U.S. ouster of the now former leader of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro. What do you think are the implications for Canada, and how should Canada respond? Our numbers again, 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. Right now it is time for a CBC News update, and here's Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. A woman is dead after being struck by a vehicle in Maple Ridge early this morning. It happened at around 5:30 near Lougheed Highway and Lady Street. The driver involved is cooperating. Vancouver police say an 87-year-old woman is in hospital with life-threatening injuries after she was hit by two vehicles last night at the intersections of Broadway and Slocan. Police say both drivers remained at the scene. The VPD says its investigation is continuing. Meanwhile, a pedestrian struck by a vehicle is in critical condition at the Kamloops Hospital. The collision happened at around 10:30 last night at Summit Drive and Columbia Street West. And the new year is not starting well for the hospital in 100 Mile House. For the second time in less than a week, the emergency department is temporarily closed because of staffing issues. The hospital ER was also closed on Friday. And now the forecast. Environment Canada is warning about heavy rain here in Metro Vancouver tonight and tomorrow, with snow at higher elevations. And snowfall warnings are in effect for the North Coast, Whistler, and the Sea to Sky Highway. In the Peace region, a chance of flurries this afternoon with highs around -15. In the central interior, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of -7. Highs around 3 with a chance of showers or wet flurries in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, clearing this afternoon with a high of 4. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, lots of sunshine this afternoon with highs around 6. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Rob, thank you very much. That's Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. You're with BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thank you very much for joining us. We are spending the hour on the U.S. ouster of now former Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. Now, since taking over, Venezuelan Vice President, who is now acting President, Delcy Rodriguez, has reached out to U.S. President Donald Trump, striking a more conciliatory tone than when she started earlier in the weekend. So for more reaction on the Venezuelan politics, CBC reached out to Manuel Rueda, a journalist working in Venezuela's capital.
Well, Rodriguez's swearing in is based on a ruling, an emergency ruling by Venezuela's Supreme Court that says that President Maduro is temporarily unavailable to fulfill his duties. So Rodriguez has basically been given 90 days as interim president that can be extended for another 3 months with a vote from Venezuela's National Assembly. What she's saying, she's changed her tune towards the U.S. overnight, basically. So what she's saying now is that she's looking to establish a balanced relationship with the United States based on respects for both nations, and wants to establish a broad agenda of cooperation. What will this agenda mean? We'll have to see in the following days. It could mean the U.S. reopening its embassy in Venezuela, for instance, recognizing the Venezuelan government, which they don't recognize. And also we'll have to see if there will be any moves with regards to oil companies, with regards to the liberation of political prisoners in Venezuela, and if the new Rodriguez government will agree to establish new elections. That's a key point that we don't know yet if it will happen.
.34 now. You're with BC Today, and we are taking your calls, your reaction to the ouster by the U.S. of Nicolás Maduro, the now former leader of Venezuela. What do you think are the implications for Canada, and how should Canada respond? Our numbers again, 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. You can also leave an email at bctoday@cbc.ca. Scott writes from Burnaby, most reports focus on the boots in Caracas, but the core move is economic. U.S. forces timed the arrest so sanctions hit, full port blockade, plus every international payment from Venezuela now rejected at the wire. overnight, billions in oil cash flow to China, Russia, Iran evaporated. That's the real story, stopping money laundering. Terry writes from Enderby, let's not forget that Hugo Chavez was democratically elected. The United States initiated an economic war against Venezuela, consistent with their previous actions against Cuba and Chile. It's only a matter of time before Trump comes for us. Our prime minister should spend his time in Europe securing undertakings that when Trump comes for Canada, they will come to our aid. And Prime Minister Mark Carney is heading to Paris for talks regarding Ukraine this week as well. My guest, Max Cameron, is joining us, professor at UBC School of Public Policy and Global Affairs. I want to go back to you, Max, on that question of oil. And Donald Trump has not been shy about saying that oil is a part of this, the oil industry and the oil reserves, the massive oil reserves in Venezuela. What role does that play here? I mean, what do you see as the plan?
I think it is extraordinarily complicated. It's not entirely clear what Trump wants and how that might be different from Marco Rubio or others. I think, for example, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, probably has Cuba in mind as part of the end game of this. Trump, on the other hand, always being the deal maker and transactional, is interested in what the implications would be for American corporations. And then more broadly, there's this newly enunciated national security strategy doctrine of the so-called Monroe Doctrine, or the Trump version or corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, which is asserting American dominance in the Western Hemisphere. I think that's probably, above all, the guiding factor. I think Marco Rubio persuaded Trump that this was possible or advisable on the grounds of drug interdiction. And that's why we saw for months attacks on small boats running drugs out of the coast of the Caribbean, Venezuela and Colombia, and off Mexico. That's something that Trump clearly believes in very strongly. The oil industry, this is certainly something that I could see Trump wanting. But, to turn around the Venezuelan oil industry would take years. There's not going to be an immediate economic benefit of that for the United States. So while I think that is an important ingredient of this, and it's remarkable that Trump has been so explicit about saying that oil is on the agenda, that oil is part of the deal here. My own sense is that the really worrisome and fundamental issue here has more to do with the United States backing away from its commitment to a rules-based international system, to multilateralism, violating in the process the UN Charter, and Article 2 of which prohibits aggression of countries against each other, except in the event of self-defense. That, I think, is for Canadians the big story, because, of course, we have a long undefended border with the United States, and they clearly see us as part of the Western Hemisphere with critical minerals, with the Northwest Passage, with the potential shipping routes in the north, with oil, with water, and so forth. And I think Canadians have to be very worried about that.
How worried? Realistically, what should Canadians be actually worried about?
Well, I mean, I think this has been the whole story with Trump from the beginning. When he talks about, making Canada the 51st state, and we ask ourselves, how worried should you be? Well, when it's Trump talking and given the power of the United States and the asymmetries between Canada and the United States, we have to take that seriously. Now, what can we do? Our options are limited. But I agree with some of the previous callers that I think we need to be clear about our refusal to accept this kind of bullying and aggressive and militaristic interventionism on the part of the United States. I would suggest that we need a doctrine, much as Trump has his corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, and other countries in the Western Hemisphere, like Mexico and Brazil. They have clearly developed principles that guide their foreign policy, that uphold the importance of sovereignty, of popular sovereignty, of non-intervention, of multilateralism, and of working through problems diplomatically. And I think that maybe in Canada, we need to work not only with European allies and others, but also with countries in the Western Hemisphere around bolstering our commitment to multilateralism and to the rule of law.
Max Cameron, it's always very good to speak with you, and I know you're busy providing this kind of context for many news outlets today. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, my pleasure.
Max Cameron is a professor at UBC School of Public Policy and Global Affairs. You're with BC Today here on CBC Radio 1, as well as CBC Television, and live as well on YouTube. Well, as we mentioned, the UN Security Council met today in New York to discuss the U.S. capture of Nicolás Maduro in Venezuela. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said in a statement that he is, quote, deeply concerned that rules of international law have not been respected. Venezuela's ambassador to the UN, Samuel Moncada, spoke as well, said the action set a dangerous precedent, and he said Maduro and his wife were, quote, kidnapped. Here he is speaking through a translator.
Mr. President, we cannot ignore a central element of this U.S. aggression. Venezuela is the victim of these attacks because of its natural resources. Our country's oil, energy, strategic resources, and geopolitical position have historically been factors of greed and external pressure.
Meanwhile, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Michael Waltz, also spoke before the UN Security Council, and he talked of Maduro and his wife as, quote, narco-terrorists, and he said this was an act of law enforcement and not one of taking over a country.
If the UN and the United Nations in this body confers legitimacy on an illegitimate narco-terrorist and the same treatment in this charter of a democratically elected president or head of state, what kind of organization is this?
We're taking your calls on this hour as well. 604-669-3733. Your reaction to the ouster of Nicolás Maduro. What are the implications for Canada, and how should Canada respond? 604-669-3733. 1-800-825-5950. Leith joins us from Langley. Welcome to the show. What are your thoughts today?
I'm thinking that the New World Order that has been shown with overwhelming force down off of Venezuela is not unlike the one that Chinese have done off the coast of their country to show overwhelming force. And Trump's done that in Venezuela to show that the New World Order is going to happen, whether we like it or not. And what it's come down to is dividing up the world into the Eastern and Western hemispheres. And so what I think we need to do is delineate the Western hemisphere, stretching from Europe, Greenland, all the way down to the southern tip of South America. And we need to organize ourselves into an understanding that the world around us is changing, and I see Trump doing what he is doing with Putin, and he's keeping him online because if he alienates Putin, Putin will join China. And so that dance that he's doing with him is like a ballet, trying to keep him on our side so that there's three powers and not two. The Eastern and the Western have not been delineated into a solid group of people with a common goal, and that is to join our forces together under a united umbrella. And I'd like to see us maybe think of joining together with the rest of the Western Hemisphere under a pact.
So Canada aligning in that way with other Western nations. Thank you very much, Leith, and thank you for your patience. I know you've been waiting a while to comment as well. Paul is next now in Vancouver. Now, what are your thoughts on the news out of Venezuela and what the implications might be for Canada? Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I really rejoiced with the people of Venezuela, although that wasn't their joy was really illustrated on the media because. Well, for reasons. But no, personally, I think that the idea that Trump putting the fear of God into dictators and tyrants, whether they be in the north or the south, it's a good thing. And I think that the message is that to these people that believe that their armies protect them from such things there gives them something to worry about. And that's always a good thing.
Paul, thank you very much for the call. Our next caller now, lots of people on the lines. Let's give out the numbers again, 604-669-3733. 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. Love to hear you weigh in on the ouster of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. What are the implications for other countries, including Canada? And how should Canada respond? If you have ties to the region as well, love to hear from you. Our next caller is James in Coldstream. Hi, James. What's your reaction?
Oh, hi there. Yeah, I agree with Trump's decision. I think we've got to stop what he was doing, and if it takes surgical warfare to do that, it should be done. I'm a little worried about that because it's scary for other small nations, including Canada. Worries me a bit there, but in this case, I think it was the right thing to do. And he's not going to take it over, but I think he needs to have fair, democratic elections, oversee that. And if the opposition runs, let the Venezuelans run their own country. And as far as the oil industry is concerned, let free enterprise take that. Let the world market on oil be what it is. Governments stay out of it. And, yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead and finish your point.
Yeah, well, my point is that Canada really can't do much, but we do need to support the reality of what was happening there. And the official opposition there should have been in power, and that wasn't allowed. And now it can happen because of what Trump did. And not that I totally agree with him and what he does, but in this case, yes.
James, thank you very much for the call from Coldstream. Certainly, the possibility or hope for democratic elections was something that our previous guests have talked about, including our guest from the Venezuelan Canadian Association of BC, who's joined us at the start of the show. Let's go now to Daryl in Vancouver. Welcome, Daryl. What are your thoughts on this?
Boy, oh boy, the last two callers remind me of a risk game. But anyways, my SFU professor, Gordon Elliott, great man, Canadian literature, staunch Canadian, said, Canada, we've got the Russian bear to the north, the American eagle to the south, the Asiatic dragon to the west, and Dated, the British lion, to the east. And he said, what's a poor little beaver to do? And he said that we must sit on the fence until we're kicked off, just given our geography and our position in the world. And to view Trump as anything but the dictator that he's proposing to overturn is ludicrous. And I think for Canada to keep our head in the sand and hope for the best would be ill-advised. He's already said, as many of your callers have stated, that he wants us to be the 51st state. He wants Greenland. He wants our water. He wants our natural resources. And to think that he's not after the oil is disingenuous. That's not the way the guy operates. And yes, Maduro was a bad guy. No bones about it. But if he's thinking about democracy, put in the opposition leaders, as one of your previous callers said, 78% or so voted for her. That's who he should be dealing with, not the current regime, which is still in power. Okay. Canada needs to make as many deals with people other than the United States. We can't trust them, and you certainly can't trust Donald Trump and his government.
Daryl, thank you very much for the call. And when it comes to that election and who was recognized as the legitimate winner of the last election, it was Edmundo Gonzalez, who was an opposition leader. But another opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, has also is not in Venezuela and has recently won the Nobel Peace Prize as well. Okay, just to get our names straight there and who actually ran in that election in 2024. Our numbers again, 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. Love to hear your thoughts on this, especially if you have ties to the region as well. John writes us an email to bctoday@cbc.ca. While the current occupant of the White House has dialed down the 51st state rhetoric, don't kid yourself in thinking that that issue is nothing to worry about. That country's leader, his acolytes, want our abundant resources, especially our oil and our water, and our defenses will not be able to stand up to the U.S. military might. And let's not forget, forays like this take the focus off of the horrendous job he is doing at home. Thank you for your email, bctoday@cbc.ca. Our numbers again, we have about 10 minutes left to take your calls, your reaction to the ouster of Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro by the U.S. at a military raid that took place on Saturday. And what do you think are the implications for Canada, and how should Canada respond? 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. Our next caller is Edith, joining us from Delta. Hi, Edith. Thanks very much for joining us. What are your thoughts?
Hi, thank you. Well, despite, how we all feel about Maduro and that, I feel that the most important aspect of this is the ignoring of international law. It's been built over hundreds of years. It's so important, and this vigilantism of the United States is terrifying. And what's even worse for us in Canada, Pierre Poilievre, our leader of the opposition, has come out and congratulated. No comments about the international law. That terrifies me. And I'd be horrified if he got into power and took that attitude through to Canadian politics. I really think we need to come out strongly in our parliament against saying this is fabulous, wonderful, whatever. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your call, Edith. And Pierre Poilievre posting on X on January 3rd, yesterday, congratulations to President Trump on successfully arresting narco-terrorist and socialist dictator Nicolás Maduro, who should live out his days in prison. The legitimate winner of the most recent Venezuelan elections, Edmundo Gonzalez, should take office. And that's the beginning of Pierre Poilievre's post on X. Thank you very much for your call. That's Edith joining us from Delta. Next up is Stan in Richmond. Hi, Stan. Go ahead.
Hi. I think the American government has just sealed the fate of Taiwan. What moral right have the Americans to say that China should not invade Taiwan and take it back as part of their own country? The Americans have no moral right to say that, oh, we're defending democracy in Taiwan. They cannot do that any longer. They're threatening Havana. They're threatening Cuba. The Cuban people have very much a lot of cultural ties with Russia and Moscow, and I think Havana won't fall like Caracas will.
Thank you for your call. That's Stan in Richmond. Next up is Devo in Vancouver. Your thoughts on Nicolás Maduro. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Canada should be prepared, very, very prepared. What I call this is Donald Trump's 2026 world domination tour. Last time we've seen something like this was 1939, Adolf Hitler's world domination tour. And I think a lot of people are missing one of the key factors. It's not oil, it's not drugs, it's BRICS. And if you're familiar with BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, Venezuela has been trading oil in their currency, not the petrodollar, which was set up back in the early 70s, that all oil had to be traded in U.S. dollars. And this is causing the United States to go broke. And this has been the big problem. So this is one of the main reasons why Trump has invaded Venezuela. And I think people don't realize that Chevron has been in Venezuela for a long, long time. And what it was is the other American oil companies wouldn't negotiate with Chavez or Maduro.
Devo, thank you very much. I'm just going to jump in here because Ron also would like to talk about the oil industry and the oil reserves in Venezuela and that its role in all of this. Ron in Langley, go ahead.
Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I feel very uncomfortable for the Venezuelan people because nothing about Trump resonates democracy
He is strictly there for the dollar bill, whether it is oil dollars or oil being sold in U.S. dollars. He will not care about democracy in Venezuela. He doesn't care about democracy in the United States. So it's going to be scary times coming up.
Ron, thank you for your call. Our final caller on this today is Ken in Vancouver. Hi, Ken, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Mm-hmm.
I was just really concerned about what precedents have set for Canada as we have been threatened by this administration. We're currently in talks with them about, our economic dealings with them. They want our oil. I think we have to really strongly make sure that they're not controlling the narrative with lots of American-owned media companies in Canada and newspapers and so forth and so on. And we need to really fortify ourselves, whether that means citizen militias, whether that means...
Citizen militias.
That's something that people have been talking about and organizing, like self-defense brigades.
How concerning is that to you, Ken? How concerning is that?
It's super concerning. I'm not in favor of militarism at all, but at the same breath, I'm a dual citizen. I'm an American citizen, and I see what's going on down there. It's completely undemocratic. He's breaking the Constitution. He's threatening people of all American citizens. He's threatening us. He's threatening Greenland. He's threatening Mexico. We have to be ready for this, and we have to get rid of American companies in Canada because they're the gateway to them taking us over and controlling the narrative in our own country.
Ken, thank you.
We hear that a lot with people talking.
Ken, thank you so much for your call. Certainly pretty dire possibilities there that you raise. Lots of emails coming in as well. Andrea on Galliano writes, after the what she calls illegal invasion of Venezuela, we see the USA does not care about respecting international law and will seize what they want, regardless of laws. Seeing this, I would like to understand why Canada, Greenland do not evict the U.S. military bases from our lands. It's wild to me that we continue to host them when the country is threatening to take us over. David writes from Fanny Bay, lots of talk about Trump making a deal with Putin that he can have Ukraine and USA gets Venezuela. That sounds very plausible these days. That's something that David says he's been seeing. And Bruce writes from Cowichan, the latest round of threats should be another wake-up call to the Canadian government, still apparently pondering F-35 jets. Thank you so much again for your emails. That's Bruce and Cowichan. Our email address, bctoday@cbc.ca. Thank you for all of your calls and your thoughts today. Lots more coverage, of course, throughout the day here on CBC.